We should insist that if the immigrant who comes here does in good faith become an American and assimilates himself to us, he shall be treated in an exact equality with everyone else. For it is an outrage to discriminate against any such man because of creed or birthplace or origin.
Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
The bosom of America is open to receive not only the opulent and respected stranger, but the oppressed and persecuted of all nations and religions, whom we shall welcome to a participation of all our rights and privileges.
America must be kept American. For this purpose, it is necessary to continue a policy of restricted immigration. I am convinced that our present economic and social conditions warrant a limitation of those to be admitted. We should find additional safety in a law requiring the immediate registration of all aliens. Those who do not wish to be partakers of the American spirit ought not to settle in America.
Do you know how many times you've moved? How many addresses you've had in your life? It's okay if you've lost track. Everyone does. Humans are mobile beings. We are always on the move, looking for something. A better life, a better opportunity. Sometimes we just want a different view. But mostly we move because we're looking for a place to call home. And finding that place, finding home, seems easier than it is. But we do it. We uproot ourselves as we look for the place where we belong. It's a funny word, uproot. The one time in our lives we compare ourselves to plants. It's an imperfect description because plants thrive best when they stay in one place. But move a person from place to place, even country to country, that only makes us stronger. It's not easy though. Harder still when you have to find a home in a country completely different from where you were born. People who come to this country, they've already had a home. They come here for a better life, but in so many cases, they have to start over again. That kind of struggle, I have to admit, impresses me. And it got me thinking about people who, excuse the expression, uproot their lives and hit the reset button by moving here. I started to wonder, why would you do that? What are you looking for? What does home look like when you have finally found it? There is no one answer to those questions, but I found 5 answers. Tonight, we're going to hear from 5 people who grew up in one part of the world and, for reasons as diverse as they are, decided to call Berks County home. They are not symbols of idealistic virtue. They're not political props. They are, like everyone you know, like everyone in the history of our country, people with stories in search of a home. By now, we've all heard that we live in a nation of immigrants. What does that mean? Let's find out.
There's a saying that you live in purgatory when you leave your land and come to a new land. So you don't belong to the land you left, and you don't belong to the land where you are. So you live in purgatory. I grew up in Lima, Peru. I was in Lima until 1999. I was in a family that is, or was at the time, middle class. So it was very, very rare when we had to worry about where money was coming from or what we were going to eat. We had a maid. That was pretty normal, I think. My mother and father went to university. So they had a certain level of expectation for me and my sister. I had a very great childhood.
My name is Bala Peterson, and I was born in Nigeria. Or I grew up or lived in the Netherlands for about 5 years and came to the United States in 1999. Now I generally say I'm from Reading, Pennsylvania. I was born in Minna. That's in Niger State. That's in the northern part of Nigeria. Nigeria is broken up geographically. In the north, there's a lot of Muslims there. The south is more, there's some Christians, but then there are people who practice traditional worship. So it's predominantly Muslim up north. My mother is from the northern part of Nigeria. My dad is from the southern part. Two very culturally different people, two different languages. I generally always see myself as a northerner. Most people see me as a northerner compared to my brothers. So growing up there with my grandfather being a Christian reverend up north, there wasn't much conflict because he was just such a dynamic man. Just loved by everyone, and so he had I guess they call it a parsonage. I remember going up north. The weather was always great and just hanging out with my cousins and generally really happy. And I was the preacher's grandson, you know? So like you got whatever you wanted.
So I'm originally from Puerto Rico, Ibaniro. It's a very beautiful scene. Mountains. You could see the southern coast of the island. I grew up in the countryside. My grandfather raised chickens and pigs, and my uncles and my grandfather also had corn farms, bananas, banana fields. My father worked as an appliance repair guy and just like planting, you know, fruits and veggies and helping around the grounds and stuff. A typical Caribbean family.
I grew up in the countryside outside of Santiago, we called Sajonas, San Jose de las Matas. That part of the island is the highest point in the Antilles. We have Pico Duarte, the highest point in the whole island of the Antilles. It was peaceful. I grew up in a farm around 1,000 acres, peacefully between cows, chickens, and all that. We played with nature. And for me, I have a great connection between me and nature. I have a great respect for that because growing up in the farm, you have respect for the animals, for the plants, for the earth. When I had all my little animals, they even had names. I had my old horse. Her name was Linda. I called Linda, she came like a dog. She was a really nice horse. I used to have a lot of chickens and turkeys, but I didn't want nobody to touch it or eat it because they were my pet.
Scene 3, My Home, Part 1.
And he would teach us. He would take the tobacco leaves and he was like, okay, this is what you do. You take it, you poke it, get the other leaf. You take it, you poke it. It was like a production thing. And I remember him saying that when it got to a certain size, if it was too heavy, stop. He would grab it, go up the ladder, and hang it to dry so it would become dry tobacco leaves. That was just with the tobacco. The other memories I have was going into the fields and just helping him out, digging trenches for planting corn or banana roots and stuff like that. Now in Puerto Rico, since we're little, like kindergarten, first grade, they started teaching us English, but they never push us into doing much other than what they teach us in school. Very basic, like how to pronounce the letter A in English or ABC, you know, learn the basic stuff. Then as you progress and you get older, you know, it gets a little more difficult. But it never goes into having a conversation with somebody in English.
My last name is not my last name. When my grandfather put my father in school, they said, so my grandfather was baptized a Christian and got the name Peteru, which was Peter. And so when he took his son to school for the first time and they asked my dad, what is your last name? Like, what is your father's name? And he says, I'm Omu Peteru. That means I'm the son of Peter. So my dad changed his last name to Peterson. But our last name was originally Makunjola. It means, I might butcher this, but may I never outrun wealth or blessings. Ola means wealth. So my brother's name is Olawale. That means blessings and wealth have come home. He's the firstborn. So Makunjola means may I never overtake my blessings. Like, may that never happen to me. Our names are they're prayers. My Yoruba name is Ola Shebeka. That means blessings don't come from one place. You can rephrase it as a prayer to say, may your blessings come from many places. I remember when I was very young, there are these huts, like there's these mud hats with these thatched roofs, and there would be peanuts because they would grow peanuts there, and we would go dive in and play in there. And it was a thatched roof, and they would lift the roof off and just dump the peanuts into this place. And so we would crawl in and jump in there. I don't know if they knew we did that, but that's a distinct memory I have from growing up. I could not wait to go and jump in there. This was when I was like 5, 6, 7, 8. And I always remember the food. The food up north is incredible. I remember my grandmother, who was just this awesome woman. She would she'd play this instrument. It was like a pot with a narrow lid, and it's almost like a pillow, and it would just make a boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom sound. It was just fascinating. I always remember that there were always people around, and there was always more than enough food.
It was really good in the way that we grew up because we really valued life. I respect others, respect nature, say the truth, be hardworking. When you grow up in the Dominican Republic, in the countryside, you study, you go to school, but then you have to go and help in the farm. And that means no matter if you are a child, you help. That helps you to have a certain responsibility with your family and everything. After that, we moved to Santiago. I stayed in the big city when I went to college and school. I paid for my own college. I worked and I paid my college to graduate. When I was in college, I was working in a boutique. I was the person I was like a clerk. I took care of the customers, and most of the time, I was that person who had to control the cost of all the products that we had and the percent of the margin of benefit profit that we were going to have in any of the products that we have. Then I was controlling almost everything over there. After I finished, then we came to the United States in the right way. When I say in the right way, we went to immigration, we had the interview, we came to the United States with a green card.
One of the things that marked my childhood was when I turned 14. One of my aunts came to the house and told us that that one of my cousins, who was like 4 years younger than me, she was like 10 or 12, was diagnosed with cancer. So up until that point, I think that my family, the young people, the children of the family, we felt like we're a series of Peter Pans who were never going to die. We had all of these powers and it was great. So at that moment, when we realized that one of our family members was going to die really soon. They said they had only given Sophia the name of my cousin, 6 months to live. So when they announced that to us, I think that was the end of our childhood. And moreover, I think it was the realization for us that we were mortal. We were human beings and that it wasn't just like this. I started at my university career doing some medicine courses. Because when you're in middle class, your family tells you, this is what you're going to study. So that's what my family did. You're going to be a doctor. I did that, but I wasn't born to be a doctor. Because after seeing my cousin die, it was really hard for me to think about people in that sense as just, functioning pieces of muscle and tendons and bones. So then I decided to study literature. Literature was incredibly satisfying. It was amazing. But then during that time, the guerrillas in Peru had invaded the universities. And so we would go to school, and then the classroom professor would come in with his books, sit them down on the table, and he would sit down. Then right behind him would come this man with a rifle. And he would come in and stand in one of the corners of the room. And then behind him was the real teacher that would come in and teach us about Marxism and Leninism. So I left the university. And then, well, that was around the time when my father's petition for my sister, my mom, and I to come to the US came through. And so we got on a plane one day. We migrated to America.
That was my home. I never thought about leaving it. Like, I know I have family in the, in the outside. We call the outside afuera. But it isn't something like, oh my gosh, I want to go to the United States. I loved it there. I loved that I was near the beach. I love that. I was with my mom and my siblings. I love the community that I came from. Like, I would have been like, I always thought about traveling, like my dad did, like my aunts, but I never thought about living somewhere else as a child. That was kind of like a surprise to me when I was like, I guess, transferred over to the United States. Like, I never really had a say. One of the best memories I know, just from being raised by my grandmother, was that she took anyone in. There was this one gentleman that he was homeless. He was like this homeless, stinky guy of the town. She took him in, showered him, clothed him. He became part of our family. He's part of our family. It was just that kind of community we lived in. We were poor, but for some reason we felt like we had everything, and we could share that with our neighbors. I gave a lot of credit for who I am to my grandmother, for my giving nature, for my, the way I care about people. I credit a lot for my grandmother because she taught me how to love and how to just be compassionate and giving. Even though you don't have much, you still have enough to give to someone else that's less fortunate than you are.
Scene 4, Becoming an Immigrant.
Some people have the misunderstanding that all the Latinos come undocumented now. I am now a US citizen. In order for you to become a US citizen, you have to be here for 5 years. You have to learn the law in the United States, you have to learn the government, you have to learn geography of the United States, and pass a test. When I came directly to New York because most of my family lived in New York. My mom lived in New York. I came in May 21st, 1985. I went into New York. I stayed there from May to December. In December, I got married to the man who used to be my boyfriend back in the Dominican Republic. He came to the United States to do his master's in engineering. Then both of us, we went to Utah State University. We stayed in Utah State University for almost 4 years to finish our master's. It was a wonderful experience being in Utah. It's a great place. After that, he came with Dominican government scholarship That means after you finish that scholarship, you have to go back and serve in the government there. We worked over there. We had 4 wonderful children. We got a divorce, my ex-husband and I. If you ask me what the biggest challenge that has been in my life, it was that. Being a mother, young, with 4 children, a stable life in DR where you are a professional, and deciding to move away. Life is completely different than the US. Over there, if you are well educated, you have reached a certain economic level, you have your maid, you have your chauffeur, you have everybody who does things for you. My friend said,
"You're crazy. You're crazy. How are you going to go with 4 children and start a new life?"
And I decided to come into the United States. I went to my mom's, I stayed with her a little bit, but I didn't want them to grow up, my kids, in New York. A single mom with 4 kids, I didn't want to live in a place where the environment can affect the way that they can grow up as a human being. I had a cousin who lived in Reading, here. At that time, it was 1997. My cousin said, you know, this is a good place to grow up for children. It's quiet, it's not expensive, and you know 2 languages. It will be easy for you to get a job. And then I said, okay. I came and I loved it. In 1997, Reading was really quiet, no problems here. I love nature because I am a big advocate of nature and I love it. I loved it when I came here. Then my cousin, at that moment, she had a house and she had to move back to DR. She said, I can rent my house for you. Okay, great.
We had a comfortable life because my father moved to the US when I was probably 8 years old. He came because there were better economic opportunities here in the US. In Peru, he was a college professor, a university professor. He had worked at some businesses as well. Working as a university professor wasn't going to be able to support a family. He moved to live with my uncles in New Jersey. He arrived here undocumented. He crossed the border through Mexico. He told us amazing stories of, like, his feat to get to New Jersey. Yeah. So I lived without a father for about 8 years. Because phone lines and phone service were so expensive, we couldn't afford a phone in our house. But my uncle, who lived 2 blocks down, he had a phone. So my dad would often call that phone and they would come and tell us that my dad was on the phone. So for about 8 to 10 years, my father was a series of letters and sometimes phone calls. It was like getting, I guess right now I would compare it to getting a monthly comic book. You know, it was like a series of comic books where my father was the hero. And he would tell us all about the things that he did and where he was working and the people he was meeting. And my sister and I would devour those letters, learning about the things that he was going through. We migrated to near where my mom's brother lives, which is in Birdsboro. In Birdsboro, there's not a lot of Latinos, or there weren't any. If there were any Latinos, we didn't know anybody.
I was accepted to an engineering school on the island. I wanted to become an industrial engineer. So they were doing these trimesters. Like the first trimester was an introduction to college or university. I don't know what they call it here, but something like that. So went through the first trimester. Everything was fine, passed everything. Jumped into the second trimester and most of the classes turned into English. The books turned into a lot of English stuff. And being that I lived in an island, I thought, how about just get into the travel and tourism industry? You know, work in the airport, stay there, you know, the airport or hotel, whatever. I went and took one of those accelerated associate degrees. I passed it. There was a lot of English there too, but it wasn't as complicated as the other stuff in engineering. The funny thing is, I finished college, graduated, started looking for places to put my resume to get interviews. Wouldn't you know, every single interview was in English. I failed every single one of them because I did not speak English. So I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm gonna go stay with my uncles in Chicago. I ended up working at this place called Goldblatt's Department Store, very famous in Chicago. Everybody spoke English, even the people who worked there. It was a lot of Mexican people that worked there. It was mixed, you know? There were only 2 Puerto Ricans that worked there. The rest were Mexican and Black. And I was shocked because everybody would come up to me and talk to me in English. And I'm like, I'm sorry, lo siento, no inglés. Very slowly, they started picking up. Okay, he doesn't speak English. I started practicing and practicing and practicing. 6 months into it, Mr. Nicholson, this Polish older guy, he was like,
You're a really good employee. You're in charge of the toy department.
but Mr. Nicholson, I don't know anything. I'm just like 20 some years old. I can't.
You're good. You will do that job.
He put me in charge of the toy department and go figure out how I did it. I did it for like 2 or 3 months after that. And then I decided to move. I bought the ticket, which in fact I still have somewhere, to go back to Puerto Rico. But I thought of it with the intention of leaving out of Philadelphia. My father said, I have family, uncles and cousins that live in this little town, Reading, Pennsylvania. And I knew all of them. They used to go visit Puerto Rico and they would stay for a month or 2. So at that point I said, okay, I'll go and visit. I took the Amtrak, another big experience for me to get on a big train like that. Took it from downtown Chicago on to Harrisburg, and then from Harrisburg took a bus to Reading. But like I said, I already had this ticket purchased to go back to Puerto Rico from Philly. So I was supposed to be there for, I think it was like 2 weeks. I get there and my cousins are like,
Whoa, you speak English really good. You'll be able to get a really good job.
that's not my intention. You know, I really want to go back and continue what I wanted to do.
No. Let us hope you get a job, because we know somebody at Sweet Street at this place that they make cakes. It's called Sweet Street Desserts.
Okay, well, how much do they pay?
Like $9 an hour.
I don't think I'll be making more than $7 an hour in Puerto Rico, if that.
The summer I came, I was turning 7. My dad decided to bring me here. He didn't do it the right way. But yeah, he decided that he wanted a better life for us here. So my brother and I both came. A better life, a better education, and we have more opportunities here. For my dad's side, I have 1 brother. For my mom's side, I have 2 sisters and a brother. My father was documented. He was a legal permanent resident because my grandfather petitioned for him to come. But unfortunately, he made some mistakes since he was young and was arrested and deported. He could have legally brought me over, but he chose not to. I don't know why. He could have. He had the chance to bring me here legally, but there is something in the way or something, I don't know what, prompted him to bring me here not the right way. I don't think we've ever talked about that. Actually, we've never talked about that. Yes, I was living in New York for almost a year, and then we moved after my grandfather passed away because we lived in his apartment. My dad, his 2 sisters, my cousin, my other cousin, my brother, and I all lived in this apartment. Everything was huge. We just have to look up all the time because there are so many skyscrapers. Everything was moving so fast, and New York was so fast. To this day, I do not like it there. Just how fast-paced the life is there. Just like, I was like completely shocked. And the people weren't so nice. I remember not having the best experiences, especially at school. When I started school, kids were really mean. Very rough kids there. That is when I started to learn a few words in English. I got to experience a lot of new things, like I ate a strawberry for the first time and a peach. We went to Times Square a lot because that was very exciting. So my aunt always took us around to get to know people, their friends, and also get to know New York. It was exciting, but at the same time overwhelming. It was hard. I used to call my mom every day. It was hard for me to be away, so far away from my mom. We lived in a neighborhood over in the Dominican Republic, but we saw each other. She always came by. I knew that this was going to be different. After my grandfather passed away, we all decided to go our separate ways. I ended up with my aunt in Reading, along with my brother and my cousins. It was a lot more peaceful, less commotion, less stimulation. We moved to a house, we rented a house. We moved like 3 times in Reading. Everything here was a bit more calm. The teachers, I loved my teachers. I went to Glenside Elementary School. My teachers were, Spanish speaking, so ESL classes were a lot better here. That was really nice. I met my friend, my best friend to this day. We both came from Dominican Republic around the same time, and she was also living in New York. I moved to Reading around the same time, so I met her. It was nice. I've always loved Reading since then, till this day.
We go to boarding school, and so it was the best boarding school around. That was a Montessori educational system. I learned a lot about life there and a lot about school there. And then we moved to Holland. And in Holland, it was a tiny school, an international school. And so the educational system is the IGCSE. That's like a 3 to 4 year program, depending. So when you're done with the IGCSE, you have your IB, which is the International Baccalaureate. That's almost like an associate's or like a 2-year thing before you go to university. When we finished the IG at CSE, my dad was like, okay. He basically said, you're going to America. He wanted us to be responsible for finding our own school and everything, applying to get our own F1 student visa. But, he would take care of paying for school and everything. So I opened up the US news rankings, one of those things that I got from the SAT place in Holland, and I looked. And under liberal arts was Point Park College. I was like, cool, I want to go there, Pittsburgh. My father didn't know that it was a liberal arts school. I just said it was ranked really high, which it was. I didn't tell him what it was for. So I came, and I was excited to go. And there was this one guy, I still remember it vividly. He had a green mohawk. And the way that Point Park College was in Pittsburgh, there's this floor that the elevator didn't stop in because it was like the psych ward or whatever. So my dad pieced it together. He was like, nope, let's go. We had our luggage to move in, and so we did not go there. I started at Kutztown the next week. My brother came a year before me. My brother is 17 months older than I am. He went to Albright, but my dad was like, you should both go to Kutztown. So he went to Kutztown. I don't know if he was excited about that either. We ended up at Kutztown, and I studied computer science under the advice of my father, which was the best advice, right? Because I was 16 when I came, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to do theater. And he was like, you can always do theater, So that's his rationale. I was just a young punk chatting on the computer and playing games on the computer, but I was on the computer all the time. So I don't know. I just figured, okay, Dad, you're paying for this, so. But I'm glad I did computer science because I feel like the way my brain is wired, I need to see. I don't know. I don't know which one came first. I don't know if I am analytical with my dad and my grandfather, but I really love solving technical challenges. That gives me life, like the young people say. I started when I was 16, and my sophomore year, I met my wife.
Scene 5, Finding Your Way.
I went to Schuylkill Valley. I said I moved a lot. So my aunt, at first I went to high school up to ninth grade in Virginia. My aunt moved me with my uncle, my mom's brother. And so I stayed there for a year. And then my aunt decided to like bring me back to this region. So then I moved back and she was living in Leesport because she wanted to be with her kids. She wanted her kids to be in a better school district. It was very weird at first. I mean, I met a lot of great people and good friends, but there's nothing like being around diversity of people, so I made the best of it, you know? Since I'm so used to moving, I have a way of making the best of things, you know, of every new space that I'm in. I made the best of it. It was a pretty good experience. It wasn't bad. It was not the greatest because I just felt like an outcast surrounded by people that have a lot more money, that grew up with a lot more money more money than you will ever have in your life. High school was a very, how should I put this? Because I'm a dreamer, undocumented, I was completely undocumented at the time. I have deferred action now, also known as DACA. I have my work permit and stuff like that. High school was really shocking, I guess you'd say, time of my life, because that's when you start realizing, like, you know, about your future. What are you going to do in your future? Where are you going to go? What is your future going to look like? What do you want to be? Stuff like that. And I knew then that, like my life, my future was going to be a lot different than most of my friends. Because it honestly was like a big question mark. Like, where do I go from here, you know? Like, you can't go to college. You can't get a job. So I was like, you know, contemplating, like, even going back. Because I was like, I don't have anything here.
I ended up getting this job with this temp agency. One of the last places I worked at doing temp agency was Old Country Buffet. I don't know if you remember that restaurant. Around the time I met my first partner in the US, and that's when everything changed. That's when my life totally took a whole turn, and I have to say, for the best, for the better. This day, and I already had in my mind, I'm leaving in about 2 to 3 weeks. I'm leaving, I'm ready. Meet him, and it was so fast, so fast. At the time, I was like, you know what? He's very interesting. He cares. From there, progressively, we started to get to know each other. I ended up moving in with him. So my ex and I decided that he was going to buy a house because he was a broker. He was a real estate broker. He invested in a lot of properties. So we decided that he was going to buy a house so that we could move in together. Right around that time, he was the property manager for this really big office complex in Wyomissing. And right around that time, he took over the property management and he said to me, would you like to clean offices, buildings? And I was like, I've never done that. I mean, am I going to be able to? He's like, I'm going to teach you. And yes, you're going to get that job. So they fired the company that was doing the cleaning. And between him and his partner, his business partner, decided that they were going to hire me to do cleaning. Something I've never done before, but it was simple. I was vacuuming, trash, cleaning, bathrooms. By myself, I was doing this. Like, it was a lot. It was 15 bathrooms with several stalls with tons of hallways, tons of stuff. At first, I didn't think I could do it, but then they paid me on a monthly basis. Once I saw the first check for working the first month, I was like, oh my goodness, there's no way that anywhere in Puerto Rico I would make this much money. There's no way. I didn't feel immigrant's not the right word at this point. I felt more like a visitor, like I was visiting a foreign land. So a foreign place that only going to be there for a very short period of time. And I was just basically looking to improve myself. So I looked at it as a foreign place that I could take advantage of, something that was free, learning the language. So at that point, I didn't feel like an immigrant. Later on, once I got together with my ex, my previous partner, by the way, we're not together anymore. Once we got together, we started living together and experiencing life in this area. That's when I can tell you, yes, I did feel like an immigrant because I was looked at differently. And not because the color of my skin, well, maybe it was because of that. I don't know. But between me and my ex, we ran into a lot of people that were kind of on the prejudice side. For what reason, I still to this day don't understand. But once I start feeling that somebody was looking at me differently because of my language or because I looked a little different or my accent, that's when I started thinking, oh my God, I am a foreigner. They look at me differently because of that. I immigrated here.
I was 17 and she was 20. And I remember seeing her walking down the DMV in Kutztown and thinking, she's like this tall. Okay. She's still this tall. She's pretty short. She was an art student and had the folio thing. And I never thought I could talk to her ever. Because I just thought she was so cool. And I remember she had the ugliest shoes also. And so I thought that was funny. She would wear the lugs boots. She would wear that. And I'm like, you're such a good looking person. Why would you have those shoes on? We used to live in the Christopher house because we're international students. We couldn't stay in the dorms because they were closed. So we had this roommate who was just not the nicest person in the world. He was staying with us for free. He had this really, really old television, and the television broke. And he wanted us to buy him a new television. So I was actually going to kick him out. And he says, hold on. There's my friend, Lolly and Molly, who was this other girl. And it was her. So I was like, I gave her this cheesy line. Because she commuted from Reading, I was like, can you buy me a hat from the Fairgrounds Mall? And so she bought me a hat. She bought me the largest size possible. And so the next day, I'm like, why did you give me this large hat? This is ridiculous. Depending on who you ask, she said, well, why don't you just come with me and pick out a hat? So she asked me out. I was so excited to go out on what I thought was a date. But then she brought a sister along. We met then, and we've been together since September 22nd, 2000. It will be 20 years this year together. She got a job as a teacher, like her dream job, teaching art in Reading School District to kids that look just like her.
My first job in Reading was in the 13th Street Post Office at night. That was my first work. When my cousin stayed with me, I said during the night, the kids are sleeping, I can work, and it's better for me. I worked for a few months. I put my resume in different banks and in different companies. I worked in the post office like probably 2 months. Then Citizens Bank called me, and also what at that time was First Union. Both of them accepted me. They interviewed. You have to take a test, and everything went well. And I decided on First Union because I believed it was a bigger company that would have probably bigger opportunities there. At the time, I was also doing accounting for small business and helping them to understand better how to set up their business, how to do a report, how when they get the bank report at the end of the month, how they can balance that. And I was educated and also helping them. Then I had these two jobs. One on the side, the other was with the bank. After 2 or 3 years working with the bank, my customers were growing and there was a need in the community. I decided that was the moment to move on. And a lot of people supported me who were my customers. They said, yeah, we need you. You have to do it. You have to do it. Then in 2000, I opened my business. I have 19 years, almost 20 years in business. And I never got married again because I believe that I have a responsibility with my kids. I don't want nobody other to be around them because it was my responsibility to make sure they grow up with the values of my work. And the results are wonderful. I have 4 kids. One is a lawyer. She is in Washington, D.C. I have a fashion designer. This is some of her work. She gave a presentation in Philadelphia, and she did her internship with Donna Karan, the designer in New York. I have another one that is a composer for movies and theater. He graduated from the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. And I have another one who is a graphic designer. Then I have seen, thankfully, thank God, the result of the sacrifice. I can see it, and that made me more thankful and proud to see. That was a lot of work, but at the end of the day, I can see my results. I worked so hard.
So for about 4 or 5 years, we were completely isolated from the diversity that is here in Reading. But I was introduced to RAC by one of my uncle's friends. And then I took some classes at RAC. And then I moved to Chicago to finish my degree in art. I have an art degree from Northern Illinois University. I was at NIU. When I was there, I got this opportunity. I took a chance to do a 6-month study abroad. I did a study abroad semester, and I went and visited Europe. I visited Spain and Italy and Switzerland. I fell in love, and I thought, that's where I was going to go. That was my plan, was to move to Europe and just work there. Find my way there and be able to be around all the art that is there. But then my decision was, before I move to Europe, I want to know where I come from. So my last semester was an independent study course. I took 3 months, and I traveled Peru to study the colors and the way in which natural colors influence the way that people dress, in the highlands specifically. The last week that I spent in Peru, I had traveled to Cusco. There's a national reserve park, pretty much the jungle, because it's very close to Brazil. Somebody said, because I really, really identified with the jungle, somebody said, if you like this, you should go to Iquitos, which is in the northeast part of Peru. And that's like pure jungle. You can only get there by boat or by plane. I arrived in Iquitos, and then I was supposed to be there for a weekend. And then the moment I jumped in the taxi, I told the taxi driver, just take me to a hotel. I didn't know anybody there. He took me through the streets. And at that moment, I understood what being born again meant. The smell of the earth itself had like the smell of fruits that was just incredible. I just wanted to dig and to start eating the soil because it was so rich in odors, and I assumed that it was rich in flavors. So that's where I was born again, in the jungle.
Scene 6, Lost and Found.
There was a time. I'm a citizen now, so I don't care. There was a time when my visa was expired, and before I got my green card with her, where I was not like, we hadn't gotten married. So she was like, let's just get married. Get married. You can apply for your green card. And so I definitely wanted to be with her, and she was not going to move. So we stayed. I enjoy visiting places, but for me, it's very important to have a home because I didn't feel like we did. Growing up, we would move. So for me, having a home was vital. It was like really, really important. We got married when I was 21. And right before we got married, I was like, let's buy a house. So we bought a house on Marion Street. I remember back then it was $40,000 and the rent was $434. I'm like, sweet. So she had a great job and I had a great job at Sovereign. For me, that was like, oh, I have a place. I have a place to stay. Through college, everybody would go home on breaks and we didn't have a place. My brother and I are different in that. So to me, that's important. And I value that a lot. Buying that first house was like, okay, we're settling. But it wasn't until we had my son, my first son, that I was like, okay, now I'm home. What changed for me was around the holidays. I'd always get into this depressive funk where I knew my mom was so far away. I'm really close to my mom. They're so far away and they're going to be celebrating Christmas and I'm here and I don't have anywhere. This is years after we've even been married that I'd still get into this funk. My wife would know and she would try to just like do something fun. But when my son was born and we started to develop our own traditions, when that depressive funk went away, that was like, oh, okay, this is home. We're not moving. We're staying put. When this tradition started from forming around my son, and that was big. That was huge for me. All of what I'm describing, moving from place to place to place to place, can always force me to be insecure. Or it forced me to put on a facade, a mask. I'm studying this thing called Enneagram now, where I can walk into a room and I know who's in charge. I know what I need to do and say to be perceived as successful. I know what to do and say to fit in. But usually that comes, I have to sacrifice who I am and what I want most of the time. I mentioned that authenticity matters so much to me. My whole life, it was all about fitting in. Because if you didn't fit in, life would be so miserable. So I tried to be funny or play sports, or I think even theater, acting was just a way to entertain people to be accepted. So meeting my wife, oh man, it was intense how quick that she wanted to love me exactly for who I was. I didn't have to act or pretend. And so just letting my hair down with her was like, oh, you know what? You're safe. And I want to be wherever you want to be. And you want to be here. So we'll be here. So like that was a part of the transition for me.
I worked so hard. I never asked for any help because I always believed that your children are your responsibility. Not the government's responsibility, not the neighbors, not my parents. If I decide to have my kids, they are my responsibility. If I become sick, I understand there's help out there, but I think they learn that working hard, sacrifice, and doing good things give them good results. And nothing you get in this life, you can get in the easy way. You value things when you work hard and you fight for them. And when I come up on all these old journeys in my life, I will say I will repeat exactly the same experience. I don't regret anything I did in the past because I believed it was the right choice after I see the results. Something that I always keep in my mind, my grandma. That farm came from family to family. My grandma stayed in the farm. I always remember my grandma be the nicest woman in the whole world, always willing to help. Anybody can just stop the farm and they can have to eat our table, they have water or whatever they need. And it could be somebody that they don't know, but they trust everybody. And I hope in this society we can get back to believing again in each other. And don't leave this that you tell me something and I don't know if it's true. Everything is by writing. In the environment I grow up, if you buy something, you don't need to go into any government or any agency to sign a paper. Everybody respects the worth of everybody. I mean, I'm telling you, I sell this piece of land for you. It's between you and me. And everybody respects the worth of the people. Now it is difficult. When I came into a society that sometimes we don't help each other or you will lose the humanity and the kindness that make us different from animals. It makes me extremely sad.
I was a straight A student from forever until ninth grade. After ninth grade, my depression really started hitting, and then my grades started dropping. I almost felt like there wasn't a point in trying so hard if I wasn't going to go anywhere. So it was really difficult. It was a really difficult time, especially when you're suffering in silence. Because no one knows what's going on. Not even my family knew what I was feeling inside. Like, they knew I was undocumented, obviously, but it's like nothing that they were kind of worried about. I felt like I was the only one. So I never had anyone to talk to about that, and really like vent. So I was just like going through high school and my head really in the clouds, like, oh my gosh, where am I going to go now? What am I going to do? I was not focused at all. It was a hard time. I always think about how my life would have been. Even now, I think about the colleges I could have gone to, where I could have traveled to. So many things. There are so many things that I think about, the opportunities that I've missed. Even career-wise, because of my status. I try to make the best of it. I've gone really far without, having complete status. But I feel like I could have done more, could have gone further.
I came back here. I did my final semester in college. I finalized everything. And then I moved back here to Reading, not really knowing what to do. Europe was not a choice for me anymore because I realized that I came from this land that was so rich that I didn't need to go and find art somewhere else, that I could find art within myself. I decided that wherever I was going to end up, it was going to be great. I didn't need to go to Europe, and I could just continue to be here. I got a job at the Reading School District. That was another big eye-opener for me because I've always loved learning. I was a teacher's assistant, what they call a paraprofessional now. And one time I was assisting this teacher. He or she pointed out a student that was sleeping in the classroom.
Hey, can you get that soon to open her book and just follow the reading?
Yeah, sure. Hey, do you want to wake up and just follow the reading with me? And this student looked at me and said,
Mister, I haven't had anything to eat since yesterday. I didn't have breakfast this morning, and I'm not going to have lunch today. My mom told us that we have run out of food stamps for the month, and we still have like 2 weeks more to go. I have 2 sisters at home, and my mom is sick, so we don't know where we're going to do. We're probably going to get kicked out of our house. We're not going to have anywhere to go, and you want me to... The only thing that I have right now is sleep. It's the only place where I can go to right now is to sleep.
I had nothing to say to her. So I said, my response was, okay, just go back to sleep then. That was my response to her. I've always struggled with that because, it's a puzzle. It's there's no right or wrong answer. But at the same time, not having a right or wrong answer is the wrong answer, I feel. I was reading something about a Chinese philosopher, and he had the same type of encounter with a young person who was very hungry and did not want to follow, you know, the storyline or the book. So the philosopher said to him, read now, and you won't be hungry tomorrow. And that really spoke to me. And so I feel like I have to develop, we have to develop that a little bit more. The importance of education and what type of tools we're giving our people in order to be able to succeed and be able to not be hungry. After I came back from Peru, I was very lost. I was doing the school district work, and I didn't know where to go in my life, and so I had barely any friends. I had no support system. It was just family. But you know, you get tired of family.
Reading back then was very different than what it is now. Back then there were Latinos, but not like it is now. It was mostly white people that lived here and some blacks that I remember. But the funny thing is, it wasn't even like, at first I noticed it, I picked up on it. I didn't make a big deal about it because it was kind of new for me, but my ex was the one that would make a big deal about it because I would be looked at differently. On one occasion, to give you an example, we bought this really nice house out in the countryside. We were going to put a brand new kitchen in the house. So he went to this very famous place in town that sells appliances. He was in the car answering a phone call. He said, just go ahead, start asking questions. Here's a list of questions. So I show up and I'm just there waiting, and there were salespeople just standing, 4 or 5 of them. And I'm like, okay, so do I have to go and talk to somebody and I did go and talk to the one guy. He's like, he'll help you. He'll go and talk to somebody. And the guy was not even doing anything, like nothing. So my ex comes in and he's like, did you get somebody? I told you to get somebody, just get somebody. And I was like, I tried. Like, I've been standing here for like 10 minutes and nobody. And that was just bad. I mean, he just blew up on them. He was like, why? Why are you standing all here? He asked already this guy. He said that the other guy was going to help him, but none of you are doing anything. And we're just about to drop $20,000 here in appliances. So goodbye. Thank you. And the manager ran out of the back. He's like, what's going on? What's going on, mister? The manager knew him. He's like, well, I sent my partner in here to get one of your guys to answer very simple little questions that we have. He asked them and he said, he's going to help you. And they're both standing there doing nothing. Why couldn't they help him? And he said, we're really sorry. We weren't sure what was going on. He didn't specify what he wanted. And I'm like, I did. And my ex knew. That was not the only time. It was countless times that he would go out. The typical one was at restaurants. Like, they would bring the check, give it to him. Almost every single time. He put a stop to that very quickly. And there were so many others. I just can't remember. It's been a while. But the funny thing is, he was the one who'd get upset about it. And I was like, just let it go. It's not worth it. Just let it go. No, they have to learn. I mean, they can't be like that with you. You make more money than some of them. Do you realize that? And because he was a manager in this property, a lot of the professionals like engineers, doctors, they would treat me really bad, like really bad. They would actually go and talk to him about it without them knowing that we were a couple. I started distancing myself from that. So this is how I was able to get over it with my ex. Being that he was a white guy, Italian family, I surround myself with a lot of his friends, and he had a lot of friends, all white people. And guess what I learned? That out of all these people that I met through him, maybe 1 or 2 were like those idiots that would treat me bad. The rest were not. were not, because they got to know the real me, and they're like, oh, so you speak 2 languages. Oh, great. So you've been to Turkey, you've been to Greece, you've done this, you've done that. So I got to know a lot of people. I started to learn that it's not everybody. It's not everybody. It's a lot of narrow-minded, closeted people that they just couldn't see through the fact that there was somebody that moved from another place and is trying to make a life living here. And they just couldn't accept it. The people that are a little more worldly, I think they're a little more open-minded.
Scene 7, My Home, Part 2.
I love Berks County. You have a beautiful green scenery. You can go to the countryside. You can get the eggs. For me, it's wonderful. For me, coming from the countryside, I was blessed to come to Reading. It's like, well, it's not exactly the same as what was there. That was a big piece of land, but at least I feel more in contact with nature here than you do in New York. And if you ask me, I prefer living in an area like this than in big cities. I am a country girl. I love it. And this is my home. I can do as much as I can. My community has known me for years. But I always feel comfortable in the city of Reading. I love it, and it makes me extremely mad when I see people saying bad things about Reading. I say, no, I have been almost 20 years in my business. I work during the tax season till 11, 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock, leaving by myself. Never did anything happen to me. And when I say that I always remember my kids, Ryan, the little one time in 2003 or 2001, we organized a big march in Reading. It, I think, had been up until then the biggest one. We get around 5,000 people together to march for a good cause, for immigration changes. And I remember we did a lot of signs on all that. My kid, he was 8 years old, and he designed his own pamphlet. And he put a little alien with a little green stump and said, "We're no aliens. We are human like you." It's touching when you see things like that from kids that age. They probably have more because they don't think in another way that there is a difference between colors or whatever. I am human like anybody else. I always believe that we have to respect, love everybody. In my office, we take care of different kinds of communities. I have Asians, I have Hindus, I have Caucasians, I have Hispanics. They come to my office. For me, as a brother or a sister, you are a human being like me.
I am an idealist. Some people have said that. People have given me all sorts of names throughout the years. They told me that I'm a dreamer. They have said that I talk a lot. They have said that I don't follow through, that I'm unorganized. That's true. That's completely true. I am irresponsible. That's also true. But they've also said that I'm glad, that I am amazing, that I am a pacifist, that I bring people together. Of all the things that have been said about me, I think that the one that gets the closest to me is I am an idealist. So I believe that we can aspire to something bigger. And so that if I believe in something, I'm going to give my life for that belief. And I believe in people. I truly believe that. When I realized that this was my home was the day I saw a woman that was walking on Penn Street. I had just come out of a job interview. I thought, that job interview went well. So I was feeling particularly happy. I was on Penn Street walking toward the railroad tracks. It was between 6th and 7th Street. And there were a group of children that were coming from, I guess, from the other side of the railroad tracks. And they were walking with like adults. So women were walking with them. And one of the women paralyzed me because of the way she walked. because of her beauty. Something about her really paralyzed me. And up to that point, I felt really confident that if I wanted to say something to somebody, be it a man or a woman, I would just say it. But that moment, she became my Medusa. I became stoned. I wanted to know who she was, and I looked for her. I couldn't find her. But I decided that day that my role in life was to make the city a better place so that when she wakes up every morning and she opens up her window, wherever she lived in the city, she was going to say, huh, this place is better than it was yesterday. Or it looks cleaner. Or it looks friendlier. So wherever she was, I was going to make the city a better place. And after a while, she became everybody. She became an icon for, men, women, children that live in the city. And at that moment, I said, okay, well, I'm committed to this place, whatever it is.
After high school, I had a year of basically working under the table. I moved back to Reading with my grandmother because my grandmother was living with my aunt. We decided to get our own place, so we are living in an apartment in Spring Street, and I was working at jobs here and there, and then immediately after high school, because I graduated June 6th. On June 15th was when Obama made the announcement about deferred action.
By this memorandum, I am setting forth how, in the exercise of our prosecutorial discretion, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, should enforce the nation's immigration laws against certain young people who were brought to this country as children and know only this country as home. As a general matter, these individuals lacked the intent to violate the law, and our ongoing review of pending removal cases is already offering administrative closure to many of them. The following criteria should be satisfied before an individual is considered for an exercise of prosecutorial discretion pursuant to this memorandum. Came to the United States under the age of 16, has continuously resided in the United States for at least 5 years preceding the date of this memorandum, and is present in the United States on the date of this memorandum. Is currently in school, has graduated from high school, has obtained a general education development certificate, or is an honorably discharged veteran of the Coast Guard or Armed Forces of the United States. Has not been convicted of a felony offense, a significant misdemeanor offense, multiple misdemeanor offenses, or otherwise poses a threat to national security or public safety, and is not above the age of 30.
Like the best day of my life. That was literally, I felt so much weight removed. I mean, it wasn't a permanent fix, but there was so much lifted off me. Like there was a window of opportunity that opened for me. It was like the most alleviating feeling I've ever felt in my life. From then on, I was really determined to make it work for myself. I worked really hard. I cleaned houses, I babysat, I did whatever I had to do to come up with the money and get deferred action. I got it a year after, like almost a year after I was approved. So I got the money, I got approved, and I was applying for college. And I was working. I had my first job at Burger King, which was great having money. I had somewhat of an income now. So yeah. And then around that time, I also found out that my best friend that I knew for my life was also undocumented. She introduced me to Myrna Fudge of the GRIP scholarship program, which, really helped me graduate. I graduated this May, and It's 5 years since I started at RAC, but still, I did it. At first, it was a bit rocky when I got out of high school, but then it was just like a window of opportunity opened up, and then my life started going up from there. Obviously, I had ups and downs. That same year, I got deferred action. My mom passed away. So it's like every time a good thing happens in my life, there's a bad thing that comes with it. So I was going through it all. I knew she always wanted me to go to college, and that's something I wish I could have told her. But wherever she is, she's seeing. And she saw it, and she's still seeing my progress from then till now.
I ended my 10-year relationship with my first partner. It was mutual. He needed to move on. He went through a midlife crisis and he lost weight, started dating girls, and I was like, that's not you, but whatever. It's what you want to do. I become a realtor because the place that I've been working for all those years was sold. So I said to myself, what is one of the things that I always wanted to do and I can possibly be very good at? And that was real estate. Because of my ex of 10 years, I learned a lot with him, and I knew you could be really good at this if you put your mind to it. So I went, took the classes out here in Wyomissing, and did everything I needed to do. Passed the classes, passed the testing, got my license, and I went into this thinking, well, I guess I'm gonna have to wait until I start talking to people. But it wasn't shocking me, but it was a wonderful feeling to know that as soon as I started telling people, people were coming up to me and saying, hey, can you help me sell my house? Hey, can you help me find a house? Can you do this for me? I was like, wow. I was absolutely wowed. Simply because right there, it told me my life here was not a waste. That all the connections I have made throughout all these years, they're coming back to me. It's one of the most amazing feelings ever. And it just continues like every week that goes by, like whether it materializes into a client or not. I tell somebody and they're like, oh my God, maybe you can help me with this. Can you help me buy a house? Can you help me sell a house? Can you do this? Again, this is all people that I made a connection with in the past 27 years. I'm not from here, but the connections I've made, the impact I have made in a lot of these people's lives, it's coming back to be a part of my life again.
We still live in the same house. I'm not going anywhere. We're not moving. She doesn't want to move, and this is home. And we've been very good ever since. Very good. Like, I am the luckiest person on this planet you don't understand. So yeah. My sons were named by my mother, my parents. My oldest son is Tulaname, which means I belong to God. There's some backstory behind that prayer or that name. And then my youngest son, he is Oloa Metobe, which means my God is big. It's crazy because like your name, you become that. So my younger son, he's like Toby. We call him Toby. So it's almost like his personality is very big and he is very intense. And I don't know how tall he will be. Those names are usually a blessing. So whenever I tell my dad, hey, Dad, I'm quitting my business. I'm quitting my job. I'm starting a new thing. And he was like, hola, Shabeka. He's like, your blessings will come from many places. There was a while there that I didn't become a citizen. I stayed on my green card for a long time. I didn't become a citizen because I always had this may sound counterintuitive, but I always used to worry about being deported. And I always used to stress out about it. But then my Nigerian passport was this only little bit of identity I had. Regardless of where we moved. So being a Nigerian was just really, really important to me for the paperwork. And so staying put and becoming an American was an emotional thing for me. The first time I said the Pledge of Allegiance, like as a citizen, it was so moving, so emotional because of only what I was giving up. But like now I get to be a part of this big thing called America, So to me, that's why I'm like, voting matters and government matters. You know what I mean? It's an honor and a privilege to be a part of that process, you know? Does that make sense? I don't take democracy for granted. I don't take this area for granted. Because I think I was fortunate enough to have a wife who wanted to be here, who wanted to stay here. And we chose to participate, to be here, to plant, to set roots. And I think I don't know, I think it's really that important.
Scene 8, in this country.
My home is here in the United States, only because I've been here for so long. I grew up here. I struggled here so much to be here, to stay here. I've been through a lot in this country. For a time, I didn't know exactly where I fit in because, I have friends who just recently got her green card. She didn't move, but she traveled with her husband, came back home to El Salvador. She said, Rainey, I was literally a stranger in my own land. People didn't consider her that she was from there. First of all, she had an accent. She was this girl who had an accent, and she was born there and raised there, and she came here so young. That's how I felt. I feel like even in my own community here of Dominicans, I sometimes feel so out of place because a lot of them, they see me and they're like, where did you learn your Spanish? It's so good. I was like, Dominican. They're like, oh, you're Dominican. I'm like, yeah. So I feel like I'm, and then you have the other side where people don't consider you of this country, and then you're like, it's kind of a tug of war of identity, and where do I belong? But I feel like I belong here. I've made my life, and I plan to continue making my life here in this country.
There's this intersection. I feel like you have some type of people who are just passing on by. They don't want to set roots. They don't want to, or they're just here so they can get someplace else. Then you have people who got off the train and just like stayed. I feel like there's something about the area that so the rails, the trails, the mountains. We live right on Alsace Road. The trails are excellent. We go to many baseball games. That's excellent. We go to the arena as much as we can. Everything you need is here in this community. But then there's also this thing where I really think that where America is going is like this area. So like manufacturing left, and I think we have the opportunity to be a model of what the future could be from a demographic perspective. A large Latino population, that's going to happen without a doubt. I wish people knew that this area was beautiful and green. Gosh, it has so much going for it. There's just so much personality here that I don't think people understand or appreciate. And that really frustrates me. And I feel like there's this, I don't know if there's an opposite of FOMO, but there are people, these people are holding on to the past, what it used to be. And in some cases, it's old money that's still here. And they are so like, oh, I wish it was the way it was before. And they don't use that as fuel to build a future. And so that's just like a sense of old school nostalgia, like, oh, Penn Avenue used to be this. What can it be now, you know? I find that someone like myself, because I never knew what it was. So like, I can dream about what it could be. I think there are more, for lack of a better word, the dreamers, these outsiders, these transplants never knew what it was. I hope those people will welcome them because they will see the opportunity and the resources that's here and they will leverage it. That's what I hope could happen.
I've been contemplating this for the past couple of years, and I can say I'm not 100% calling this home. But if I happen to meet the right person, this will be home, because this is what I know. I just haven't, I'm open-minded to moving out of here and leaving the area simply because I cannot meet somebody decent. That would be the only reason why I would move. Just find something somewhere else. But this is a great area. I love living here. I've created a lot of friends here. I have a life here. This is what I call home now. And whether my mind wanders off here and there thinking that there might be something better somewhere else, it still draws me right back here. It grounds me because I know this area is wonderful. It's not 100% wonderful just because I don't have the perfect person to share it with. The way I'm looking at my life in the future, yes, I will consider this my home. I would love to if I had a companion to be here with me. But even if that doesn't happen, I still feel like this is home now. I would love to go back to the island, but it's going to be so different. This will be my home, whether I buy later on when I'm older, I buy something back in Puerto Rico or one of the beaches nearby. I would still probably be here because I can tell already, this is going to be my home. And that will be my future. And I'm looking forward to it.
The idea behind Barrio is a reflection of the ideals or the lessons I learned in the jungle in Peru, where the people are just very, very happy. Even if they don't know what they're going to eat the next day, they're very, very happy. Even if they have to walk to school through a sea of mud, they're happy. Even if, you know, they have a strike every 2 months and fight the government, they're happy. Because I think that internally they know that they need that happiness in order to survive, in order to live. And so for me, happiness is not just a right, but a duty. Do not think that you're going to learn everything about me in 10 minutes. I think that's something that people assume here. And not just with people, but with programming. And, you know, they think, oh, and I'm going to go clean up this park. And that's all good and everything. But if you go clean it 5 times, don't think that people around the city or the neighbors are just going to continue cleaning it after you. You know? You have to get to know them. You have to involve people in the design and the creation of whatever it is that we are doing here.
Everybody, on the end of the day, wants to work hard and help and be the family success. If we can help, we are going to do better work. I am an advocate for the community. I have been working with the Hispanic Center, with the Latino Chamber, with the Dominican Union, and always at the Dominican Roundtable. That is a national organization to advocate for the Dominicans in the 50 states. I believe that when you work for a nonprofit organization, I give my time and whatever I can give without expecting absolutely nothing back. I don't want money. I don't want that you put me any place. I just want to make a difference in my community and with the people that is around us. If we do little things, the world is going to be different. Everybody at the end of the day wants to work hard and help and be the family success. If we can help, we are going to do better work.